Just something that stood out to me. I don't know if it's ever stood out to you a little bit. Like different numbers in the Bible that like God, like 7 and 3, and just all these
Yeah.
numbers that all throughout your story, I heard like it was 7 pounds and seven
Yes.
ounces. You're in the hospital for 7 days,
7 days.
multiple times. She
Born at
got the
1107. Yeah.
yeah, she got
Yes.
the surgery 3 months early when she was
Yeah.
3 months old. So it's cool
Yeah.
to see even those little like God winks of like,
Yeah.
hey, I'm in this, and
They
it
are.
might
They're
sound
just
silly to
little
some people,
signs.
but just
No.
like over and over again things like that. Like sometimes I remember when Tyler and Janelle shared about Iverson. So they
Yeah.
shared their testimony with the church a while back, and how, I mean, they thought that they were going to lose him like
Yeah.
right after he was born. And
Yeah.
they said they just asked God, like, we need to see a little thing,
Yeah.
a little thing of you like each day. And
Yeah.
so it was, they would see like just simple
And
little
he is.
things
He's
in
there.
the, yeah.
He's there. And also, he's there if you're willing to acknowledge him and see that he's there.
Mm-hmm.
You know, these, and I don't see how, I was talking to my sister-in-law about this.
Yeah.
I don't see how non-Christians make it.
Yeah.
And not having that, I don't see how they survive without him.
Yeah.
And not, acknowledging and looking for those signs from God. I just
Yeah.
don't see how they make it.
Yeah. Something that, so we were talking, you should start coming to our women's group. I feel like that would be
Yeah.
fun. But so we were talking last night at our women's groups. We always share our highs and lows, like while we're eating dinner. And a lot of us had started this new reading plan. So it's called the Bible Recap. It's a great resource, and I can link to it in the show notes. But it, like the Bible app can read the Bible verses to you. You go through the Bible chronologically in a year. Wow. And then it spends like, so that only takes like 12 minutes to listen to the reading. And then it's about 8 minutes of listening to it being explained. Wow. And a lot of times she'll put like God shots. And Christy was like, we should start saying our God shots from like, our past week or two. And we were like, yeah, that's a great idea, just to see, because there's hard stuff that we're all going through. And so to actually, rather than focusing in on like the valleys of our lives, like focusing in on, okay, where do we see God's hand in this?
Yeah,
and
that's awesome.
So yeah, it really does like shift our perspective. Not that we're neglecting to say like, yeah, life's hard. There's hard stuff. We live in a broken world. Like, but all those but God things.
Yes, and just giving thanks in all circumstances. First Thessalonians says, give thanks to him in everything. So in the lows, in the highs, just be thankful that he's there with you. And just appreciate the fact that you do have him. No matter where you're at, you have God with you.
Yeah. Yes. And then like I don't know, it might be first, I don't think it is, but so when we talk about anxiety and stuff, and one of the verses in the Bible, how it says like, through everything with prayer and thanksgiving, make your requests known to God, and the peace of God, which surpasses all understanding, will guard your heart and mind in Christ Jesus. So I have one of my good friends, she has really severe like anxiety, and whenever she calls me up, something that I've started doing recently, like I'll listen to her, ask her how she's feeling, and I'll also say, what's 10 things that you're thankful for? And that almost always like, and sometimes it's hard to come up with 10 things.
It is. You really have to start thinking.
Like, sometimes that does like just bring it down a lot.
Ground you.
And so just, I mean, that's an encouragement to anybody with anxiety. It's not that you don't pray hard enough, because you shared that somebody was like, you just have to have more faith. And yes, sometimes like, yes, we need faith, but like we live in a broken world. It's not that you're not close enough with God. Like it's just, it's something that comes with it. So focusing back when that anxiety strikes, when those anxiety attacks that like feel so debilitating strikes, just like, see God through it. And then also, okay, what's 10 things that I can refocus my mind on that I'm thankful for, or 3, like, just start somewhere. Yeah. So with the questions, what advice would you give to parents who have a child with health issues to still prioritize their marriage even when you feel so hopeless and broken?
And that's a hard one, because it's so easy. You have each other. And so I think we kind of take that for granted.
Yeah.
And just that we don't really need each other right now because we know we have each other right now. And so we kind of let it fall to the wayside. But really just realizing that that person is going through all of that with you. They're having that same experience with you. And realizing that that can bring you together or that can tear you apart. If you let it, that problem can create you against your spouse, or that problem can create you and your spouse against that problem. And it's like you two are just taking on the world together. And so just remembering that you do have a spouse and they are important to you, and they were so important to you before, and that hasn't changed. They're still that important to you, and you still need that person in your life, and they can offer that comfort to you because, again, they're the only one that really truly knows what the two of you are going through. True. A lot of people know a lot about what you're going through, but they're not there at 1:00 in the morning when you're crying your eyes out because you got test results that weren't exactly what you wanted. They weren't there to hold each other when your daughter was in open heart surgery. And so just realizing that can really bring you together if you allow it to. And to remember each other. That was a big part in our relationship with my husband, that it had kind of started to pull us apart from each other, and the anxiety kind of started to pull us apart from each other, because every new thing that popped up, it was like the anxiety got higher. And so then it became more us against each other instead of us against the problem.
And even like trying to, in the midst of that, like, and I know it's maybe not as easy for people who don't have family around, like their in-laws and their parents, but even finding like a trusted babysitter. I know like care.com has some really good resources. Ones that but even like in Dakota and I's marriage, we're like, okay, we're gonna try to do monthly date nights. And it doesn't always happen.
We started out with that
goal, like, because we would like to a lot more often, but just because of his busy schedule and my busy schedule, like weekly date nights just we can't do it at that point in this point.
And we said that also, and that's what we said monthly. We said monthly date nights. And sometimes that date night looked like putting Lila to bed, and we would lay on the couch together and watch a movie, realizing that it doesn't have to be this huge affair of going out. The whole point is just to bring yourselves back to each other and spend that time together and be a husband and wife, because in that moment, you're not mommy and daddy, you're not worried about hearts. You're not worried about, is she eating enough? You're not worried about, tummy problems, anything like that with your baby. You're worried about each other and your relationship.
Yeah, that's so good. Okay, so just even like thinking about, I mean, sometimes people don't want to talk about it, especially as Christians, but the whole intimacy thing too, like
it's a big deal.
In 1 Corinthians, I think it's chapter 7, how it does talk about like, unless it's a time of prayer that you've both like agreed to, like, don't neglect intimacy, because it says that like then we will fall into temptation. So even just like sometimes I'm sure like if anxiety is heightened, or like you're totally exhausted because like, you're touched out and the kids have been all like just take that time. And sometimes you the more the more you do it, the more you let it,
and that was a really hard point in our marriage for that, only because, and we're different. Men and women are different. And so whereas maybe it's easier for the man to kind of put that away, put that worry away or lives away and focus on that intimacy. For me, it was like all I thought about was Lila and taking care of Lila and this anxiety. And that, that was the last thing that was on my mind, was being intimate with my husband. And so that really did take a toll on our lives. But as you said, really pushing through that and realizing that that's part of our relationship, and that always did bring us closer together. Having those moments together, it does bring you closer together. And so just really trying to make a point of having those moments together, it really does make a difference. And it's hard, and I know it's hard, but just really trying.
Yeah, I feel like the devil's so good about like tempting you outside of marriage.
Yeah.
And then once you get married, he's like tempting you not to
do. Yes.
So you have to.
And that was something, the lust was something that we struggled with before marriage.
Yeah.
And my husband even brought that up before, and it was like we couldn't keep our hands off each other before marriage. Yeah. And then, afterwards it was just like a chore. And like for me, not for him. Yeah. For me, it was just like one more thing, like, one more box that needed checked off at the end of the day of doing, of having that time with him. It was just one more thing that I had to do.
Yeah.
And that's not what it should be, and we really should. And that's a big thing for married couples is you get to enjoy that part of life. Yes. Yeah. And so when it gets to that point of having to do it and, just one more thing, and then you become more anxious about that. The anxiety is keeping you from doing it, but then you become anxious because you're not having that time with them. And it's of the devil.
Yeah.
It is of the devil.
Yeah. So I didn't plan on, but I'm sure a lot of people can relate to that aspect of it.
Oh, yeah.
So you share with me how this season of your life took it from being a religion to having a deeper relationship with the Lord. Tell us more about that, and what encouragement would you give to someone who doesn't feel like they have a meaningful relationship with God right now?
Yes. And so I feel like in our lives as Christians, and we always have that like aha moment, like in your testimony, like, aha, this is when I turned to the Lord, and this is when I realized that I needed the Lord in my life, and that is when my life really turned around and I started living for the Lord. And so in my life, in my lifetime, I really feel like that moment never came to me in like an aha way of I wasn't living for the Lord, and then my life changed and I accepted the Lord, and now I am living for the Lord. Only because from the time I was 1 year old, that is all I ever known was the Lord and accepting Jesus Christ and living for the Lord.
Yeah.
And so, and it was never like I turned away from the Lord, or I never, acknowledged Jesus Christ as Savior. Like I just always had that in my life.
Right.
And I thank my mom for that tremendously. She raised me in that way.
Yeah.
And that's not a bad thing. I mean, that is a good way to be. But at some point, and it was Lila, I had to realize, did I have a relationship with God, or was I acknowledging God? And so you think in any relationship, with your spouse, or even not a romantic relationship, with a best friend, with, a sibling, with a parent, anything, does it work if your whole relationship is just you acknowledging them?
Yeah.
What would it look like in your and Dakota's relationship if all you did was acknowledge each other?
Yeah, it would go to crap.
It would. It wouldn't work, and it doesn't work. And so after everything with Lila happened, I really started realizing, going to church on Sunday and then, going to bed at night and praying your, now I lay me down to sleep prayer.
Yeah.
That's not a relationship with God.
Right.
That is acknowledging God.
That's so good.
And so then Lila took it from that to, I have to talk to God all day. And even at this point in my life, if, I talk to God all day.
Same.
And, it's just like, if I'm not talking to God, really, then something's wrong, because I just do. I do it all the time now. And I pray to him, And even a lot of times it's not me really praying to him. It's just me talking to him like I would to Matthew, or my mom.
And that's what he wants.
And and you think about your relationship here on earth with people, and it's like with your husband, you go to him for everything. You go to him for if you want an opinion. You go to him if something's wrong. You go to him if something's not wrong and something's really great. You go to him for that. And that is really where we should be with God as well. And that is where really Lila took me to that point in, if something's going on at work, I go to God and I just, I tell him about it. And, how should I handle this, God? Or if a choice needs to be made, what choice do I make, God? And in the same way that you do have a relationship here on earth with people, it took me to having that relationship with God and not just acknowledging him and, praying every so often. And when I go to bed at night, praying him, it took me to, at Walmart and I get a really good parking spot. It's just like, oh, thank you, God. Just something little like that. But it's like, it just happens so naturally now. And so that really is where I'm at now. I went from acknowledging him to he's just so intertwined in my life, and it's just so natural now just to have a conversation with him.
That's so great. Yeah. And that's very much what that verse says, where it says pray without ceasing. That's exactly what it looks like. It's spending that time with him
all the time with him.
And it does bring you like a comfort and a hope, and like you can go to him in the highs and lows, like you said. Yeah. So what advice or encouragement would you give to someone who has prayed for healing over their loved one and has not seen it in the way that they're asking God to show up? These are hard.
That's a really hard one.
Yeah.
Because like I said before, when we went to Charlottesville and it was on Valentine's Day, the holiday of the heart. And we were going to find out about Lila's heart. And I prayed and I believed. And, and that's what we're told. You pray, you believe, it's going to happen.
Yes.
And so, and I prayed, I believed that we were going to go. And it was just going to be like, hey, we don't know what those Winchester doctors saw, but your baby's fine, And so for me, realizing that just because I want it that way doesn't mean that that is the way it is supposed to be.
Yeah.
And I always like to reference Esther.
Yeah.
And, perhaps you were created for such a time as this. And that has always just been, Esther's really been like my comfort story for so long. And it's like, I'll read it 20 times and it's like, all right, Leah, let's move on. Let's read something else. Let's read a different book of the Bible. But I really can go there and like rest in Esther.
Wow.
And so just realizing that in Lila's heart not being healed, how many lives have I been able to touch? Has God been able to touch through me?
Yeah.
Really is the big thing. And just realizing, when Lila had her second surgery and we were there in Morgantown, another baby was there, and he was from locally around our area. And, I was able to reach out to that mom. And just, I found her on Facebook because I heard him talking about where that baby was from. And he was from a town close to ours. And I was like, oh, so I'm going to do some digging. You have a lot of time in the hospital. And so I did some digging and found out who that baby's mommy was. And I was able to reach out to her through Facebook and just say, we're here if you need anything, and we'll be praying for you.
Wow. And
so that wouldn't have happened if it hadn't have been for Lila's heart.
Yeah.
And, another at our church now that we go to, the pastor retired. And so we had another pastor come in just for a while we were looking for somebody, and his granddaughter had a baby prematurely. And I was able to, in that, and knowing what she was going through, living in the PICU, the NICU, I was able to kind of empathize with her because I knew what it felt like because I had gone through it with Lila. And so I never would have been able to reach out to her and really touch her life the way I did if I hadn't have went through it with Lila. And, I was able to offer her encouragement and through God and help her in that way, that there's no way that it even probably would have occurred to me to do that if I hadn't have went through it before that. And so I guess just realizing that, no, it's not going the way that you're praying for it to go. And it's not going the way that you're hoping for it to go and the way you think it should go, but it's going the way that God needs it to go so that you can work through that. And then also accepting that this is the way it is going. I can be bitter about it and I can become depressed about it, or I can use it for God's glory and really put yourself out there and show God through this situation. And so I guess, and it's hard, and it's easy for me to sit here, 3 years later, I'm sure in those first few months of living with Lila and going through this, I'm sure I didn't see it that way. But, hindsight, and I know it's easy to sit here on this couch and tell you because everything has gone so good with us through God. Everything has gone so good for us. And so I know it's probably not easy to hear that if you're at a point in your life of where we were at, 3 years ago. But just knowing that there is hope through that and there is a way to give all the glory to God through that is a good way to look at it. It's how I choose to look at it.
That's great advice. How have you practically seen God work in and through this hard season that y'all are walking through? So you kind of shared about that. Is there anything else you wanted to add?
Just in him, in all of our but God moments, it's just, and seeing those, and those are big moments, those but Gods that we saw were such big moments, but in just the way of, I made it through the day and I didn't have a panic attack. Like that's God working, or we've made it this long and Lila hasn't had another ear infection. Like that's God working in our life. And choosing to see God working that way in our life has just been a big deal. It doesn't seem like a big deal, but it is a big deal. Those little things are big deals also.
Isn't it funny that I feel like just talking with so many people who have gone through really hard things, it's almost like their perspective has really changed.
Absolutely.
So if you've just kind of been surface level and not had any big traumas in your life or anything, the little things can really get to you.
Right.
But when you've had all these big traumas, it's the little things you just sweep off. I just think about just you sharing that with me. So this Wednesday here in a couple of days, Madeline has her ENT consultation and I was feeling nervous about her getting that little surgery on her ears because she has so many ear infections and is on antibiotic for over a month, and so it just hearing that, and I'm okay, Leah got through it and had so much faith in things that were so much bigger than and then when she had to get tubes, you were
I didn't cry. That was her only surgery so far that I haven't cried. So and it's
everybody that I talk to, they're it is so worth it because it's even affecting Madeline's hearing
it
some,
is.
And she'll be I can't hear, my ears hurt, and
there.
So I have to talk louder with her. And
it's been a complete turnaround improvement for Lila. We're not at the doctor every, we go see Tori we were seeing Tori once a month. And now it's we haven't seen her in a while. It's a good thing, yes.